That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about A Sacrifice, the second film directed by Jordan Scott, which Vertical Entertainment is releasing June 28th, 2024.
You said second film?
Yes.
What's Jordan Scott's first film?
Her first film was Cracks from 2009, starring it's a period piece at an all-girls boarding school with Juno Temple and a pretty fun performance from Ava Green. But notably, Jordan is the daughter of Ridley.
Oh. What is A Sacrifice about? American social psychologist Ben Monroe investigates a local cult connected to a disturbing event while his daughter becomes embroiled with a mysterious local boy. What's your pull quote?
Scott squanders a novel cast and an accomplished crew with an abridged and emotionally sterilized thriller on cult mentality.
Mine. This story is begging to be made into a miniseries. As it is, A Sacrifice left me feeling like I never want to be responsible for a teenager.
Well, I always feel that way. But, it's based on a novel called Tokyo by British novelist Nicholas Hogg. I think no relation to Joanna. But clearly this has been relocated to another city, which is Berlin.
Yeah. And I was trying to read about the book Tokyo, and it does seem like some key things from that story were changed to this for this movie. Mm-hmm. But the story, it's kind of complicated and kind of nonsensical to me, and I feel like you have to just ruin it right away in order to make it make sense. But Eric Bana plays Ben Monroe, mm-hmm. a social psychologist. His specialty is cults. And we see he's in Berlin. He's divorced with a teenage girl named Mazzy.
Mm-hmm.
And
played by Sadie Sink.
And Mazzy's acting up, so she's been sent to Berlin to live with her dad. But, and I'm telling it all out of sequence, but Eric Bana's character gets lured into a cult by way of his daughter being, kind of abducted.
Well, they're attempting to lure him. He's targeted.
They really want him
mm-hmm.
because they think, and this makes no sense to me, that if he joins their cult, he can validate them mm-hmm. because he's this world-renowned social psychologist.
Because of his expertise, and there is some overlap of beliefs.
Right, because he is talking... We hear him talking about how cults can offer a supportive environment and how they can get more things done, and being an individual isn't always the best approach.
Yeah, we're listening to lectures. He's bringing up Hannah Arendt's The Origins of Totalitarianism and how she claims that loneliness is the breeding ground for terror. And that all sounds fine and dandy, but those subtexts aren't really kind of teased out.
But how does he get lured in? He has a colleague, another psychologist, who's mm-hmm. played by...
Sylvia Hex from Blade Runner 2049.
And she's the one who recommended him. And she also had the idea that, if we can get his daughter into the cult, that will sort of lure him in. And how are they going to get the daughter? There's this handsome young man, this German guy who plays him?
Jonas Dassler playing Martin.
We see that he already has experience luring girls in.
Mm-hmm.
So he lures Mazzy in very easily. And things don't go as planned because they were hoping that she would join the cult and sort of preach what they're talking about and then get her dad to come see. But things go left because she ends up getting drugged and kind of overdosing, and then she gets upset and wants to leave. So now they're like, we have to go to plan B, which is basically hold her hostage and have her dad come. And they're like, if you don't join our cult, we're going to kill your daughter. And of course he's like, I'm going to go tell, and runs out of the building. And the cult leader, who's played by...
Sophie Rois, who, after I saw the trailer for this, she was the reason I was most excited.
She's the most interesting part of this movie, which we'll talk about more. But she, after Eric Bana, because she tells Eric Bana, if you don't join my cult, I'm going to kill your daughter. Eric Bana runs out and says he's going to call the police. What does she do? Well, we should probably explain. This cult, I don't understand what their MO is, because all they do is commit suicide, mm-hmm. mass suicides, individual suicides, and they're not really being clear. It's not even clear when the bodies are found, like that they belong to this cult. We see investigators trying to put the pieces together, but I don't know what purpose these suicides satisfy, and there's no ask.
And then Eric Bana says that about as he's investigating, because it opens with a mass suicide that he's called into, which is why he can't pick up his daughter at the airport. And he is talking to his colleague Nina, Sylvia Hoeks, I think I'm saying her last name wrong. He says, what's the purpose of joining whatever this cult's doing? He says, you can't just lead with death.
And that's what they're doing, though. Like, that's
kinda,
all they do. So, not quite sure what they're getting from this, but the leader, she says, well, we can't do any good behind bars, so y'all know what you have to do. And they light themselves on fire and blow up the building as the leader runs out.
they turn it and burn it.
They turn it and burn it. But the leader leaves, and then Eric Bana had already left, and he had figured out that, his daughter, because the leader tells him, your daughter's not here. And that's when he puts two and two together, because there were other suicides at a lake, that his daughter's at this lake. An important plot point is that we get a lot of flashbacks in the daughter's mind of her drowning, and we learn that the reason there's contention between her parents and why they may have gotten divorced is because when she was younger, she had an incident like at the ocean or the beach where she got caught by a riptide, and her dad kind of froze and couldn't go save her, so the mom had to save her, and that's why the parents got divorced.
Yeah, so there have been trust issues. The daughter visiting Berlin is supposedly a way to reestablish this trust that he can be a present parent.
So the final scene is the dad running to the lake.
We need to talk more about that scene.
Yes, and he sees his daughter basically drowning in the water purposely, and he goes and grabs her. The end. He saves her. There are so many cool, I could already in my head come up with stories for a 7-episode miniseries. But as it is, and it's short, it's only, I rarely want things to be longer, but I feel like minimum this movie needed to be 30 minutes longer, because I just think, even the ending with the daughter, she walks into the lake and she sees, it's almost like a ghost is luring her in. And I think it was the filmmaker's attempt, because there's no room to breathe in this script, that was supposed to represent maybe some sort of brainwashing.
Yes.
But we don't get any time with her with the cult where she's actually being brainwashed.
I don't believe that she's brainwashed. I think Sadie Sink is miscast because she seems too headstrong.
Absolutely.
She's playing a variation of her character from The Whale, which was another character I could not stand. And yeah, we don't correctly psychologize her relationship with her father to make us believe that either of them would likely be lured by the manipulations of this cult and what the cult could offer them that they're missing. And then, the end, she's being lured by the ghost of the previous dead cult victim, Lotte, that Martin had also gotten into the group. And it's like, were we trying to do a Let's Scare Jessica type of deal where she's drawn into the water, she's drawn to death because she's been fed that subconsciously? None of that makes sense. Too many corners are cut, and as you said, there are a lot of really fascinating elements and characters that we just get placed before us. And
what did I like? The cinematography.
Yes, it was shot by Julie Kirkwood, who did the Karen Kusama film Destroyer, which I love, with Nicole Kidman. Is also the Black Coat's daughter from Oz Perkins is also worth a look.
The actor playing Hilma,
Sophie Rois.
I mean, her voice and her presence is just it's just automatically captivating. I feel like the story should have been built around her.
I agree. She's Austrian. She always reminds me of Glenn Close. But I became aware of her at the same time as you when we saw Tom Tykwer's film 3 back in 2010, where she's married and her and her husband have an affair with the same man.
That's that lady?
Yeah, that's her.
Oh, wow. I like that movie too. The kid playing Martin.
Okay, Jonas Dassler. You need to look up. He played this German serial killer named Fritz Honka in Fatih Akin's The Golden Glove, which people across the board hated, but I quite liked because it's really uncomfortable and disgusting. It's about a 70s serial killer. He is transformed in that movie.
I really want to watch that, because I found him very alluring, because he's a handsome guy, but there's something about him that feels a little off, like his eyes, his little hairdo. He has this homemade haircut. his backstory, which is that he lives with his grandma because his parents died in a car accident. And then one day he finds his grandmother dead. And it appears, I couldn't tell if it was in his mind or if this was true, but after his grandmother died, he just took her to like somewhere else and she's just laying dead on the ground.
Yeah, it's like he's hiding out in this abandoned building that's going to be torn down for construction.
But I thought that the actor and that character were really, alluring would be a good word. And I thought that the story should have just focused on this cult leader and this guy who she uses to lure in these women. And then maybe the subplot could be investigators trying to solve. But I didn't even need that because we already know that it's this cult. It's immediate because the opening scene is a mass suicide, like you said, and we see that all the victims have. Initially, we couldn't tell what it was, but we come to find out that it's like a white shell with a black dot in the middle that they wear as necklaces. And when they decide to kill themselves, they put the shell in their mouth. So,
but it's kind of that Silence of the Lambs element that also seems to go nowhere.
And then the problem with that is like immediately when we're introduced to the cult, we realize, oh, it's these cult members committing suicide. So I don't know why we needed investigators.
There's no surprise, and also, so Eric Bana is the least interesting part of this. But I also, you brought up a good point about their motivations for wanting him. It's like there's a lot of celebrities that champion Scientology, and as you said, everybody thinks that's nonsense. So I don't know how this person is going to legitimize Udall. So that his character, Ben Monroe, and I like how he wrote a book called The Science of Loneliness, his character, and they give it a really nice binding because I wrote it down like, oh, I wonder if that...
It's a real book.
I want to read that. That person needs to have some kind of personality, to develop a cult of personality that draws people in.
Well, yes, I feel like if it were a miniseries, there'd be an entire episode on his celebrity and how he is really like at the forefront of like a thinker, but as it is. And actually, until the very end of the film, you had to set me straight. The way he's presented, I thought he was a grad student. I didn't even realize that he was like a working psychologist.
Well, because he's also stretched because he has to...
he's working on a paper
I think it's a book that he has to get to his publisher that he's very late on.
But because of the way he's talking about it and that lady...
Nina,
and he wants her to read like a draft of it. It all came across to me like he was... like finishing his PhD or something.
He's just really passive.
Right. So that's why I was like, this guy, getting him to join your cult's going to send you over. And then over what? Like,
and I think Sylvia Hoeks is beautiful. She reminds me a lot of Genevieve Bouillold here. But her reveal, it's not so much of a reveal. It's clear that she's defending the mass suicide.
The first time we meet her, it's awkward because she is at the crime scene with Eric Bana, and there's a really awkward scene where he's on his phone and she asks him, we had to rewind it a few times, she asks him, are you feeling better? And he goes, oh God, no, it's my daughter. What? But then after that they have conversations and she's defending cults and he's like acting like she's crazy, which I thought was so weird because your entire career is about legitimizing that sort of mindset. So I felt like the way he was talking to her felt very dismissive of a topic that you defend.
Right.
Yeah.
But then when we get her reveal, which is told in this just brief flashback where it's like we learn that she's the kind of the spiritual daughter of Hilma, and that Nina's parents overturned the power of the cult to Hilma when she was a young child. Like the scene where Nina self-immolates really should have had some kind of resonance.
Yes. And again, if it were a miniseries, I feel like there could have been an entire episode of the flashback to how Hilma and Nina developed their relationship. And when her mother gave her over to this cult leader, that was very fascinating, but it happens like that at a point where it's like, well, it's too late now.
It's too much to process, and it's like, wait, you want to know so much more about the conflict that these two women probably shared, and as a maternal figure, how this woman probably was manipulating her. It should have felt like the end of Saint Maud.
Yeah.
But that moment.
Okay, who played the daughter?
Sadie Sink from... You know her from Stranger Things and The Whale.
I'm sure she's a nice lady, young lady, and she has beautiful hair, but...
She does.
I thought that character was so annoying. And I know that teenagers can be that way, but like you already mentioned, she's a little too headstrong but also a little too stupid sometimes. And I'm sure people would argue that that's how teenagers are. I don't have one to take care of, so I don't know. It was just grating to watch. And I assume that they were making her seem like that to show that she might be susceptible to cult mentality.
Yeah, but not enough. Like, there's not a need that she's that lacking that she's gonna go head over heels for this boy.
So how does she meet the boy? He's prompted that she'll be at the airport, so he shows up, bumps into her in the subway, asks her to join him somewhere. They go on like a meet cute type thing at a cafe, and she was saying the dumbest shit. She's like, I've been into gratitude before it was even a thing. And all the while sitting there with this like green shake, it was like, it looked like one of those green smoothies, except that it had a bunch of leaves shoved in it. The prop person, I don't know what y'all were thinking. That shit looked ridiculous. But she was so annoying.
And that, I wrote that line down too, because that actually sounds like something some self-involved teenager would say. But none of the rest of her characterization or screen presence really kind of fits with that.
But I thought she was grating in The Whale, so I don't know if she's being cast to type because that's how I don't know.
She was less grating here than in The Whale, but...
So her and the boy, where they really get going is he invites her out to like the forest somewhere, and then they get high. And I thought, I mean, I really liked the boy, but she seemed, whatever. They get high, she's tripping, and that's when she's really plugged into the bullshit he's selling.
Supposedly, but it, again, he sends her this link of Sophie Rois giving like a TED Talk to sell her cult. And then...
pulls out some ash.
Yes.
That he says is from some tree that Hilma gave him, and they like to rub it on their faces. Again, there's so much that I found interesting, and I just needed it to breathe more.
But Mazzy starts sending that same link of Hilma to all her other little friends in Berlin. And all they are is watching that woman say that, and they're hooked.
Yeah, because actually the actual end of the film is her little friend watching the clip she sent her, and it would seem that this other girl's getting... Like maybe, because Hilma never, we can assume, doesn't get caught, I guess, even though she's still posting stuff on YouTube. So maybe Hilma's going to have a resurgence, but...
But I think that's where, and we're missing out on some provocative layers by putting this story in modern day Berlin and the history of Germany and talking about collectivism versus individualism. Because in Tokyo, that's a much different scenario and what Japanese culture might kind of...
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because within this film, Eric Bana's character talks about how in Japan, there's a subculture of like young people who will lock themselves in their room for years, and the only socialization they get is from being online. So I find it odd that, yeah, they set this story somewhere that doesn't feel as restrictive, but has,
a very dark history. You can't just bring up Hannah Arendt and be like, oh yeah, that's all I'm gonna do with this. And then all of the talk about loneliness. I was expecting the Beatles' Eleanor Rigby to play over this with, oh, look at all the lonely people, because that's really the only facet of what's potentially drawing these people in.
The connection between Eric Bana and Nina, the other therapist, his colleague, feels so rushed that I thought, like, because all they're doing is like therapizing each other. And it's just like, there's nothing less sexy than watching these two people sort of like critique each other's approach to life. But then they're also like attracted to each other. It just didn't feel like it made sense at all.
No, and if they're thinking that he has a loneliness that they can exploit, that is never apparent. He seems perfectly fine. Just...
Mazzy's name, you brought it up first, the Netflix show Family Reunion, the opening theme song where they're like, Mazzy, Mazzy, Mazzy.
Oh yeah, because the little boy, his nickname is similar to that.
Yeah, well, his name is Mazzy.
Oh, it is?
We see, oh God, again, annoying teenagers. Her dad gets mad at her the night before because she stays out all night. And he's like, bitch, like, you're in a new city, and a major city, and you just went all night and didn't tell me. But then the next night, he leaves the house to go visit Nina. So Mazzy's mad.
And he leaves her a note.
And she reprimands him. Like, you brought me out here, and you're not even present, blah, blah, blah. That was so crazy to me.
It's crazy. Also, she goes outside and sees them making out in the alley. I mean,
and she questions her dad, like,
But again, if you had properly developed this very strange attachment styles between this father and daughter, a lot more of that could have been really provocative.
But after that incident, she gets mad and like leaves and goes to the center where this cult is located to try to find her little boyfriend Martin. But he's not there. But Hilma is. And when we see Hilma, I thought it was such a cute scene because she's sitting crisscross applesauce in this empty room in front of 3 freestanding mirrors.
It's very Anya Savarda.
It was quite the visual.
And she, of course, you can come anytime. And then Mazzy just like opens the floodgates. That could have been a riff on that Strangers with Candy episode that I love, where Jerry Blank gets roped into a cult.
She can't leave. So Mazzy ends up getting taken because there's this other young lady who goes to school, I guess. Because that was another side story that I didn't quite understand. That Mazzy's in school.
Yeah, she's taking a course while she's
one
there.
Course that we see her go to one time. But she meets this really pretty girl, and the girl becomes very fast friends with her, and then takes her to a rave. And we find out that rave is kind of where the cult kind of like lures people in. So then I thought, is her little friend part of the cult?
No, because I think she might have even ended up dead. I was unsure of what Martin did to her.
But anyway, Mazzy gets drugged at this rave.
And he happens to be there.
And Martin happens to be there, and he looks like he's he really has quite the look. But she gets dragged back to the center with help from Martin, and that's when Hilma's like, oh, this is not going as planned, so we need to execute plan B, which is, get her dad down here.
And how that is she's, Mazzy's all messed up, and they're like, we can't go back to your father like this, we got to clean you up, and she demands to leave, and then they get physical with her. I don't know why they didn't just let her go back to her dad until he was ready to be emotionally manipulated.
Because there's no time, there's no space.
I know,
yeah.
It's just like, I don't know.
I thought Martin looked like if you mixed Peter Facinelli and Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah, he's a nice intense look.
When Eric Bana shows up to the center and they just tell him like, oh, well, first Nina says, well, I know where your daughter is. She's with my friends. And he's like, what? Who are your friends? These people. And then Hilma's like, yeah, we have her. And if you want to see her again, you're going to join our cult. When I tell you, I would have ran out that door so fast. And he's just standing there like,
he did eventually.
This is unacceptable.
He goes and bangs on some doors.
He does, but he didn't leave soon enough for me. But then when he does leave, he kind of like flails out of the building. And then you see Hilma run after him and stop at the door. And then turns around. And that's when we see Nina. Well, first they dump gasoline on everyone. And then I did think when Nina self-immolates, it did look pretty.
It did look good. Again, the production of the film is good. And also the score by Volker Bertelmann, who just won an Oscar for All Quiet on the Western Front, that score.
Yeah, I'm bummed, especially thinking like Hulu made that horrible 9 Perfect Strangers.
Sure.
Someone could have done Tokyo miniseries.
And maybe even Jordan Scott herself could have done this, but I don't know if maybe that there's a different edit of this film that might have worked better. The original title was Berlin Nobody.
Oh, I like that better.
I like that better than this very generic A Sacrifice, which kind of reminds me of Kate Shortland's film, The Berlin Syndrome, which was a microcosm of fascist mentality set within an apartment building. But
do you have anything else?
No.
As it is, this film didn't work for me. I would give it 2 out of 5. What would you give it?
I would as well. 2.
Join us on Patreon and listen to our podcast. Bye.